there was a great robbery that happened. They got these Brinks trucks. I don't know if you ever heard of a Brinks truck.
Yeah.
Brinks will go around and collect money from different businesses. And the security guards go through a rigorous check and all this shit. But there was a big Brinks truck robbery that happened like back in the 80s. I don't remember the exact year.
Right.
And I was listening to him talk about it on the radio one day. And these guys got robbed. And it made the news that these guys got robbed because it's hard to rob a Brinks truck. You know?
Definitely.
And so they made off with like, I don't know, it's not going to sound like a big amount now, but back in the 80s, they made off with like $5 million.
That's a lot of money.
Which now it would be like they made off with like $100 million.
Not quite, but yeah, maybe 30 million.
40 years ago? You're talking 40 years ago.
Maybe.
Anyway.
It's a lot.
They made off of it like at the time it was like holy fuck, $5 million. Holy, how does anybody even have $5 million?
That's fair.
So anyway, they took like $5 million. A week later, the security guards start buying houses and fucking sports cars. It took like 3 days after they did that to figure out that they had not been robbed, that they had staged the rob. And it all made the news. Like the whole country, like you said, back then there was very little, it wasn't 24-hour news.
You had
two and a half news.
2.5 hours.
In the little bit of news that we got was this robbery. And everybody in the country was like, holy fuck, a Brinks truck got robbed.
Right.
What happened? $5 million. These guys took off with $5 million. And then, like I said, like a week later, these dudes are buying sports cars and houses and shit. And everybody's like, holy shit, did you hear? The Brinks guys faked the robbery.
That's great.
And they fucking just stole the money themselves.
So crazy.
And they could have gotten away with it.
They just did stupid.
The thing is, man, like, if you're a criminal, like I've always thought I could be a criminal. I've always thought if I had to be a criminal, like, because I look at what criminals do to get caught. And I always think to myself, the only reason you got caught is because you're dumb as shit.
Right. I watched this show called Animal Kingdom on TNT, and it follows this like crime family in California. Like the mom grew up, she was like the crime syndicate of her boys.
Okay.
And they go out, they do these jobs where they rob places, and right, she's been doing this her entire life basically. But she was so smart with, like, you know, they take money, they divvy up. She bought rental properties, people paid rent, and so they laundered the money through all these properties and stuff. Yeah. They survived like 40 years, you know, however long they're out there doing this and getting away with it. And when one of them wants, you know, an extra $2,000 to go buy it, like, no, you can't have that, man. You can't be doing that shit, you know. The younger one buys himself. He embezzled a bunch of money from the mom, from his grandma, and stole a bunch of money from her, and then bought a bowling alley, paid cash for a bowling alley, and then launders the money through the bowling alley, through salaries and rent and stuff. So that he's, you know, they just took all the money, all these scores. They get like $500,000 or something. They can't just give it to the kids.
Right.
So they would launder it, and they all had a payroll. They all had a job.
Yeah.
So, you know,
these guys. That's a big thing among criminals. You ever seen the movie Gangster with Denzel Washington?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know what literally led to him catching the eye of the FBI and ultimately getting caught? His girlfriend bought him a lynx coat. It was some kind of fancy fur coat, right? He was going to a big boxing match.
Right.
And he had, you know, front row seats and all this shit. And right before they went to the boxing match, his girlfriend bought him this fancy ass fur coat, huge fur coat. So he goes to the boxing match, and the FBI is watching those kind of events back then because they know that people with big money and gamblers and all kinds of people committing crimes show up at that shit because they're the only ones that can afford to go. And he shows up, and he's the Mac Daddy of the Mac Daddy, and they all treated him that way because he had this fur coat on. And that's what drew initial attention to him and ultimately led to unraveling of one of the biggest heroin operations in American history. is because they saw him wearing a big fancy ass fur coat. So I'm saying, if you're a criminal and you're committed, your life is, you've decided, all right, I don't want to make a living. I'm going to steal. I'm going to commit crimes. I'm going to sell illegal drugs. I'm going to do something. Ultimately, they usually don't get caught doing what they're doing. Like the bank robbers don't get caught robbing the bank.
No. They get caught.
They get caught doing some stupid shit after they've gotten away with it. Most of the times they get away. I've studied robbing banks, by the way. I know a lot about robbing banks. I read a lot about it.
Dude, honestly, banks get robbed all the time. And nope, they're just like, oh, well.
They don't catch people.
They don't catch them.
They
do not catch them.
I know, because I remember I at one point in my life, I felt comfortable enough to go into a bank. I wouldn't walk into a bank now.
You know how crazy it was through COVID when they were like, if you want to come in the bank, you have to put on a mask.
Oh man, dude.
You're like, what? We're like, all right.
At the time, for the first time in like 20 years, the restaurant that I worked at, instead of us getting paid in cash every night, they would give us a check.
Really?
At the end of the night.
Oh, wow.
A check that we had to go in the morning in cash.
That's crazy.
And I had to go to Metro City Bank, which I had never heard of. And so I looked up and they had locations all over the place. I went in without a mask because I wanted to be like, I'm just coming in to cash a check.
Right.
And they made me go back to my car and get my mask. And I was
like, I'm going to get my mask and my gun. This is the
only
only solution.
That doesn't make me a safer person to be in the bank. If I've got a mask on, I'm tempted to commit a crime. I feel like I'm in a mask. What the fuck? I might as well grab some money while I'm in here. What the fuck is stopping me?
You're like,
don't know who I am.
I tried to do this the right way.
Right.
I've gone out. Now I have my gun and my mask, and I need more money than I have right here. So
you don't need. First of all, let me be perfectly clear. You don't need. You want to know why people rob banks? You don't need a gun to rob a bank. You don't need a gun. No. You can walk in there with a mask and a note, and if you give them a note that says "Give me money," the bank has told every bank employee never to risk your life over a robbery. So their thing is just give them the money. So the guy that I did study a bank robber just because I was fascinated by what he did. He's this Wall Street guy, and he lost all his money on Wall Street. And he lost his seat. He had a seat on Wall Street. I don't know what it means to have a seat on Wall Street, but he has a seat. He lost his seat. But he's got all these bills. And he's got a wife that is expecting him to pay all these bills. And she, of course, you know, a guy, you're going to do whatever you got to do to make your woman happy.
Right.
He couldn't figure out what the fuck to do. So he was like, I'm going to rob banks. So he studied robbing banks, and he found out a couple things about it. I'll share these things to the public. You give them a note. You don't need a gun. You don't need a mask. You don't need a disguise. You need a hat, glasses, and gloves with your hands in your pockets so that they don't see that you have gloves on. You walk in with a hat and sunglasses. This is how this guy did it. Okay. He'd walk in, he'd hand him a note, and they would hand him the money. And he was like, man, I was making as much. He's like, my wife didn't even realize I'd lost my job. Oh, damn. I was just out there robbing banks.
It's crazy.
He's like, but because I was doing it so often, ultimately the FBI was like, we need to stop this guy. He's robbing a lot of banks. God damn, we let him get away for a while.
All right.
But fuck, he keeps doing it. So he got enough money yet? But this guy owed his overhead, his bills in his life were like $30,000 a month.
Right.
So he had to make $30,000, and he was getting about $10,000 to $15,000 per bank job.
He robbed 10 banks.
Yeah. This is the guy who's pulling him up.
Let's see. His name was Gene Trantel.
He got 9 years.
No, that was John Trantel. It was Wall Street.
He got 9 years.
Steven asked for her number. His name was Steven something. Let's see. Steven lost his spot on the trading floor back in 2003, became desperate. His wife said she noticed some changes. He was losing weight. He wasn't taking care of himself. He'd snap. What else did he get here?
He's like, I'm robbing banks for you, goddammit. Leave me the fuck alone.
Oh, what is this? Oh, his dad was a cop. Okay.
Yeah.
Most
No
of them
shit.
end up because of their getaway car.
Right. He didn't use a getaway car. You know what he would do? This is what he would do. He'd walk to the bank holding a cup of coffee.
We could tell.
He would set his coffee on the trash can outside the bank, walk into the bank, hand him a note, rob the bank, walk out, pick up his coffee, and walk down the fucking sidewalk. Isn't that fucking, that is,
Oh,
dude, that is
he was
huge
dog the Long
fucking
Island bank robber.
balls.
Wow,
Huge
that's
balls.
funny.
Huge balls. I studied the guy. I read all about him. I thought about,
He didn't get that much money. He got 60 grand out of 10 bangs. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not like millions, but
he only robbed 9.
he robbed 10 bangs.
You know why he got
He's
caught?
actually getting out next year.
You know why he got caught?
Dude, that's not bad. Wait, when was this written? This was written in 2011, so he's been out. He only got a couple. Dude,
Yeah.
dude,
He got no time.
He got no time.
He got no time. The reason he got no time is because
Bro.
he didn't have a gun. That's why he didn't get any time. Because he didn't have a gun.
All right, take notes.
Right.
Shit.
When I read his story, and they did like a Dateline on it.
Yeah, so the CNBC thing on.
Yeah. They did like a thing. I watched the whole thing. I was like, fuck.
Gave him a
man.
note.
Yeah,
He's
he
like,
gave him a
hey,
note.
hey.
And the only reason they caught him, is because his
That's crazy, man.
the only reason-
Yes, a fingerprint
because
on one of the notes.
he left a fingerprint on one of the notes, and they had his fingerprint because he was a Wall Street guy, and they
Damn.
ultimately caught him because of that. And one day he was at an intersection, and like, you know how they federal marshals just converge on your ass,
Right.
And so his wife was like, they were like, your husband is a bank robber, and she was like, get the fuck out of here, he's not a bank robber, and they're like, wow. And then she goes to visit him in jail, and she's like, they're saying you're a bank robber, and he's like, I'm a bank robber.
Unreal.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy, man. Crazy shit.
All right.